Mr. D?
Here.
Ms. Casper?
Here.
Ms. French? Mr. Horton?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer? Ms. Fuller? Mr. Hatfield?
Here.
Ms. Manning?
Here.
Mr. Sarge?
Here.
Mr. Vogel? Dr. Whiteley? Mr. Zink here. Motion to approve the agenda. Second. Thanks, Julie. Any discussion? We did switch those around on here.
So what have we switched?
We've switched the item 6 is now item 4.
Thank you.
Everything else then goes down from there. Okay, any other questions? Fix this real fast. And Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. D,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield,
Yes.
Ms. Manning, Mr. Sarge,
Yes.
Mr. Zink, yes. Okay. Motion to approve the October 25th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Do we want to do it since it's not?
We'll just do the motion second and I'll bring it forward for the next one.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, and we will update this and we'll bring it to the next meeting. Any other discussion? Then so the next meeting will also have amended minutes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. D,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield,
Yes.
Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Sarge,
Yes.
Mr. Zink, yes.
So we'll just amend those the next meeting.
At the next one, there'll be another agenda item to amend these minutes. Or rather, not these minutes, the 10:25 minutes, correct.
Great.
Okay, we're gonna start with the binder review. We've got new binders for us going through, so, when we have the meetings, we'll be able to, collect the information and keep it for reference. So the old binder you can keep, it has a lot of good information and stuff like that, but, everything moving forward, we use the 2024 binder for the new material that we covered in this committee. So the first thing, we'll have it up here on the screen so, you can see as well. The first thing we want to do is do, the review that we received back from the OCC. We submitted our master plan out there as it currently sits right now with K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, with the additions to the 2 high schools and the additions to Plains and East Freshman. So they've gone through and done an update about what that looks like. And I'll probably let Jim talk us through this because this team created this chart. We can go through it and explain what this chart really means.
Sure. Okay.
Oh, for those who don't know, this is Jim Boris, who's our architect.
Yeah, maybe we should introduce, I'm Jim Boris, what do we introduce ourselves?
Chris Dunford, I'm with VSWC Architects as well.
And Katie Davison, the SWC as well.
So, glad to be here, everybody, and, we heard of lots of, comments on the new binder, so I'm real excited about it. We're bringing new stuff every week, and.
Just like Christmas.
Just like Christmas. So anyway, this, as Chris said, we just kind of got all new information from the OFCC, kind of all updated things. You guys have been through and you got your enrollment study done and that got approved. The OFCC has gone through and updated all the assessments to the current day cost. So if you remember our flow chart that we had, you know, you had to pass the L thing, and then there was the 2 big blocks, the enrollment and the assessments. Those have been done, on track, looking good. So now we have the information from both of those studies, and then the OFCC puts those together and basically can come up with a master plan then based on the enrollment numbers and the assessments and the dollar values associated with them. So we got that information just as of like 2 days ago, maybe, yeah, Tuesday. And so what we did is we took that information in from the OFCC, and the stuff you get from the OFCC is a big pack. I mean, each school has a big packet of stuff, and there's 10,000 numbers on there, and it's a very complicated thing. So we tried to boil it down and simplify it and try to put a good bit of information on one spreadsheet so you can kind of get an idea on what's happening with everything. So we'll kind of go through that. Of course, the schools are listed down, the first column here. The second column, where it has the colors in it, the red and the green, and some of them are the board colors. If you remember, the OFCC, when they go through and they do their assessments, they look at HVAC, electrical, they look at all the different systems in the building, and they assign a cost to each one of those things, and then they come up with a cost for that building, which would take basically to bring that building up to the standards of a new building. Okay, so they come up with that, that's part of the assessment. And at the same time then, they look at, well, what would it cost to build that building brand new? Okay, instead of renovating that building, what would it cost to replace that building? So what they do is they take the cost of replacing the building, the cost of renovating the building, and they divide it by the replacement cost, and that gives them a percentage. If the percentage is over 66%, in their eyes, then money is better spent to replace that building. So anything that's 66% or higher, the OFCC recommends replacing. So what you see here is the colors that you see here. The reds are the ones that you can see that those schools represent. They're more than 66%. And as part of your master plan in the past, we've shown those as being taken offline or demolished or whatever you want to do, repurposed, whatever you want to do with those buildings. And then the green ones, of course, as you can see, those are your newer schools, and those are the ones, of course, that don't take a lot of dollars to renovate and bring up to current standards or a new building. And so those would be part of the master plan and stay in the program. Now, you're gonna see some of these that have the blurred red to green, right? So if you look at the percentages on those, let's just take the first one here, Cherokee, for example. It's ranked at 74%, which is over the 66% threshold. But from past discussions and all, we think Cherokee is worth keeping. It's pretty good shape, seems to function well. So that has always been part of the master plan, keeping that building and doing the renovations on that building that would be needed.
When we started this whole process, it was green.
Yes.
So now 4 or 5 years later, it's more.
We're in the blur now.
Right.
So what would happen with Cherokee, Independence, and Ridge, or the three that are in the blurred colors, is we would have to go back to the OFCC and basically ask for a variance to allow the school district to go ahead and do the renovations in lieu of replacing those buildings.
And we would still hopefully get their share if they grant that
If they
variance.
grant that, then yes.
That is correct.
And if they don't grant that variance, it seems like with the difference in cost of renovation and the percentage they would pay, then we would probably need to just replace it, correct?
That'll be a decision for us to make, if we're gonna go ahead and not take the money and still renovate, or take the money and build something new, if they don't give us the variance.
From past conversations with them, personally, I'm very confident that they would grant that, that variance for that school. I mean, the school's in pretty good shape, and they've talked in the past when we've had conversation with them. I will say, they say it's a process to get through that, and it's a process that we probably need to get started if you all like this master plan. We probably need to start this variance process on those three buildings. So anyway, that's
Can I ask a question? Are those the three that have changed since we got this process? Or is it just Cherokee that has changed?
Well, those are the three that were green.
That's what I'm saying, they were green,
They were
so-
green at one point.
but nothing else has changed, just
No,
those three.
everything else was in the red before, they just have a higher percentage now, these would
Okay.
be in the maybe 70s, now they're in the 80s.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, the reality is, when we first started this, 5 years, whatever, how many years ago it was, when all these schools that are red, a lot of them were right on the 66, 67,
Yeah,
68, they were like that. And what happens is that OFCC every year updates their assessment cost, how much it costs to renovate a building, and they also keep changing what the cost to build new is, of course, because there's inflation. So these things, every year, these things are going like this. They're changing all the time as they change their numbers. So, but anyway, this is where we're at this point. Any other questions on that? Pretty clear. Okay, second column there again, it just tells the work is either demolish or take offline, renovate, new building, or addition. So you can kind of see, we just kind of track what's happening in each building. And then what we have is basically we're identifying phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. There again, those might be grouped together differently. These might change, but just for conversation right now, that's the way we're looking at it. So phase 1 is basically the additions. If you go all the way to the bottom of your chart, they're the additions to the 2 high schools. Okay, if you look at that, the additions cost $66,443,000 and change each. And so the total portion of that master plan would be basically $132 million. So that's kind of phase 1. Now, I want to point out to you, there's also a lot of, when they did the assessment of the existing buildings, they identified, if you look over here in the future phases, they've identified about $41 million to $50 million worth of renovation work that they're recommending. Now, there again, that could happen 30 years from now, it could happen, that, there again, that's up to you. But I just wanted to point out that this is truly just for the additions, and this does not do anything in the existing building. Okay. Phase 2 then is basically the additions to the 2 junior high buildings, which would be Plains and East Freshman. There again, these are big additions, and you can see there again, 58 million, 46 million. So phase 2 is about $105 million. We go on farther down. Phase 3 then is getting into the elementary schools. So what you'll see here is there's lots of numbers. There's some new schools. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 new schools. Those are at $38 million each. And then you'll see other numbers that are like, 400,000, 500,000. Those are actually demolition numbers that are in that portion of the work. So there again, the work then on the elementary schools comes in at about 163 million. And then outside of that, we're just labeled as future. There again, they're looking at every one of your buildings. So even your best brand new buildings, there's work that's identified in them to bring them up to a brand new level. So, you'll see even in Wyandotte, there's $3.5 million worth of various work that they would recommend. There again, you don't have to do that work. This is all segmented work. You can choose not to do any of that, or it could be done 20 years down the road or something along those lines. But this, there again, the master plan, they look at every single school in your district, and you have to have that approved master plan, as we've talked about in the past. So total number is a small $594 million for the master plan.
So the number went up, right?
The number is going up every year, yes.
But not as much as I would have anticipated with the cost
Because
changes between.
I remember the last time we talked, we had the 2 brand new high schools, so those were pretty costly things. Now we're doing additions and really, so it balances out a little bit where you see some increase, but not that we would have thought for sure.
And the future work, would that still be privy to the cost sharing? And the future work only works through phases 1, 2, 3?
No, this would be part of the program also. Yeah. The other thing I'll point out is, there again, if these these phases happen 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, whatever that is, you gotta remember there's 2% to 3% inflation each year that you have to put on those numbers. So these are basically in today's dollars that we're looking at right now.
And to answer your question a little bit more, Doug, when you're approved with that, if it goes through the OFCC, we talked about the L program and building up credits for any construction that you do locally funded, that you build up the credits. Those credits could be used for any of the future work that we do, so we don't have to go back to the taxpayer. If we want to do a renovation on an existing building, we can do it through the credits that we've earned.
Where are we percentage wise with the state right now? What is it? Was 29?
We're at 31.
Yeah,
Oh, we're
it's
up to 31?
Yeah.
And again, they'll update that in the spring this year. They do it every spring.
And once we start phase one, that will not continue to change, that will stay the
Um,
same for all
Once
four
we spend $1 million.
phases.
Yeah, once you lock in your master plan, get it approved, then you do a part of your plan of $1 million or more, that locks in your percentage at that point.
And it's locked in forever.
Forever on this work specified.
Yes.
Yes.
On this master.
On this
plan.
master plan, yes.
Right. Any questions about this?
Good?
Get there, but-
Next one, we put the enrollment in here. Okay.
The enrollment's next.
Yeah, the enrollment page is next. Basically, we've just taken the enrollment and plugged it in, based on the OFC enrollment data we received. So again, we plugged it in to look at what we would need from the square footage. Easy, we'll talk to this again real quick.
Yeah, I think we'll go pretty quick on this one. Again, just the schools here, this is the work that was laid out in the master plan. This is the current square footage of each one of the buildings in this column, so you can see that. Then the OFCC, as they place number of students, you get X amount of square feet per student in the building. And so they've laid out basically how many square foot they would need for X amount of students. So as you can see, they've placed actually the required square footage is a little bit under the square footage of all your buildings. So you can kind of see how they're doing that and fitting the students in there. Current enrollment in that line, and then this is the OFCC projected enrollment. And there again, if you look clear at the bottom, this 19,074, that is the number that came off the enrollment projections that we've been using for the OFCC.
And that's the number they'll use for all the calculations for the square footage and things like that. They'll use that number.
And if we want to have the ability to expand beyond that number, we would have to basically design the building so they can be expanded at our own cost.
Correct. Or you design it so they can be extended for future use, and maybe we modify our master plan and help dollars as part of that as well. So.
There is, under the OFCC standards, there is a little bit of extra capacity built into the design. Hear what they say, like roughly 10%. So if you're designing it for 19074, your school can still operate a little bit higher than that. There's a little built in.
Chris, the private study that we're doing, if that number were to be different, significantly different, you know, not anything like close, but can we give that to them and they adjust accordingly, or at least take it into consideration, or is it like, no?
I think it would prompt a conversation. We'd show it to them, and if we compare methodologies from one we received to the one that was used, and if it is significantly different, then I think they would want to know that and what's different. They don't want to spend taxpayer dollars like we don't unnecessarily or unwisely. So I don't know if they'll eventually agree to it or not.
Right, but they would at least consider it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
know when that's going to be finished?
I'm trying to reach out to him right now. I don't know if he's not well right now. He's been on the pocket.
Yeah, Chris has been reaching out for over a month,
Yeah,
and
so
we haven't
I
gotten.
gotta reach out to Brad Bumble recommended me, so I'm gonna reach out to Brad to get the one with Brad and not me.
I will say the OFCC, I think in some of the early days, they overbuilt square footage in districts. So I think they're very cautious at this point, not overbuilding and spending additional fees. So they are very conservative on their, I think, on their enrollment projections and those kind of things.
But they've also been inaccurate.
They have, that's 100% accurate too.
Say that nicely.
That is true.
Yeah, and When I talked about peers across the state, that's pretty common though, that, you know, they base it all on this, but they haven't been very accurate. Yep. Any questions about the enrollment piece and how that works? Awesome. So, with the-
One question, with the current enrollment for these schools, is that based on their K, like for elementary, is that based on their K through 6 status, or is that corrected for the fact that it's K through 5? That's just basically how many bodies are in the building.
Yeah, what we have to figure out what is, that's the number of students, yeah. If we skip this, we'll come back to this at the end. So there's the schedule we'll come back to. Let's go through, the layouts, next page over. So when we went through the enrollment piece, and we look at square footage and what we need to fit the number of students, that's where we start looking at, the square footage that's going to be required from the OFCC. So they said we have that number of students, you need this number of square feet in addition to your high schools. So we're going to start looking at that, what that means to add these on, and what that would mean from the general, here's the space requirements from the OFCC, and then the overhead, here's how we fit on the site with that. So we'll go through the high schools and planes and each freshman. We didn't do anything about any new buildings. We haven't had those discussions. This is just for the additions, for 6 through 12 to get that done. So we'll go through that real quick. Now, you did all the wrong.
Okay.
Right, you did.
So we'll start with the high schools, and this is, of course, east and west are basically identical buildings, so we're looking at them as a one. The first 3 drawings that you see are basically just the existing building as it is. So you can use that for reference. We put room numbers in, and we also put square footages in each one of the spaces. So that's a good reference too for you as you kind of think about things and look through planning, that kind of thing.
And we tried to color code based on current use, the best use right now. It may not be like that next year or the year after, but we had a meeting with the principals and talked about generally what are the rooms being used for, so.
And in general, the categories that we have here, these are categories that the OFCC uses when they're planning a new building or an addition. They like to see, they kind of proportion out square footages in each one of these categories, basically. So there again, we've kind of taken your existing buildings, you're gonna see that on all 3 of your buildings. We've kind of taken a shot at how those spaces will fit into the OFCC categories. So there again, existing buildings. So let's look at the additions that we're showing on here. So if you go to, what pages is everybody on the same page? It should look about like this. This is the first floor plan.
Yes. The second to the last page.
Yeah, all the drawings at the very beginning of your existing, so.
Second to the last page.
Of the high school package.
Yeah.
Okay, so there again, everything that's in white is existing building. And then anything that's color on this one is proposed addition or areas where we could do additions on these buildings. What do you want to say here? I guess the reality is, so you can kind of look up the thing, and there again, these are large additions that are going on in these buildings. And these 2 high school sites are somewhat restricted. And so there's lots of ways to looking at putting on additions, but a lot of the areas you cannot add on to. So this is kind of one of the first, and really the reason we did these plans is it's really testing to make sure that the sites and the buildings would accommodate the amount of square footage that the OFCC would require on here. So there again, these are kind of beginning preliminary looks at possibilities how we can get additions and get the amount of square footage on these buildings. So, you know, this one's pretty obvious. The high schools, you know, you've got your main concourse that goes down the middle, and all your gyms and your kind of noisy things are on this side of the concourse. And then all the academic stuff is kind of on this side. So as you can see, basically we just extended, these are your existing corridors that come down through here on your pods. So basically we just extended those out, and then basically loop or build another cross corridor going that way. By doing this, it allows you to keep windows in all these existing classrooms that you have on the 2 stories there. So we're creating new outdoor courtyards here. We've got them labeled as possible outdoor learning areas that could be developed as that. We're showing new locker commons. You know, you have your locker commons here on your main corridor. There again, you'll have increased numbers of students, so we have more lockers laid out. As you bring in more students in your building, of course, you're gonna have more students eating lunch, more students needing art classes and all that kind of thing. So there again, these additions that are showing up on this way, you know, we have addition on the cafeteria, more service area. This could be mechanical area, this could be food prep or kitchen type areas. And then we're showing kind of some more generic classrooms added on down here. There again, they could be some more music department things. Those aren't highly defined at this point, but we're just trying to find locations on the building that would make sense to put additions on, to carry on kind of the programs as you currently have them set up. We are kind of proposing, just looking at your buildings, that maybe we create in your existing building, we create some collaborative or innovation type spaces so that we start to kind of set up pods or areas that people can come to create a smaller and kind of break down the scale of the building a little bit. So there again, just some ideas, very preliminary thoughts on some of those things. So that's kind of it on high school.
How many people, go ahead, Betsy. How many people can fit in the gym for seating? Do you know,
I think they're like 2,400.
24?
I think that's right around there, maybe a little bit more. If you put in the bleachers along the walkway, I think actual bleacher seats is like 2,400.
How many are you allowed to have?
Capacity wise, we've had way over that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can have.
Yeah.
Betsy, was that your own question? Can you, because I am directionally challenged, can you tell me where this is in the buildings? Like, can you tell me where on Easton, how you're, where?
Yeah. Let me go to the
Site plan,
It's on here.
Yeah.
This happens to be East High School here. So there again, here's the big parking lots out front. And then so we'll be going down this side and across the back. The stadium's right here, this is coming across the back. And these are the classrooms.
Children's is on the other side.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And
Let's look at Westfall here. They're again basically the same.
So you
That'll
have part of
range
the
you.
parking lot at
This is the
Front
main,
Door.
this is the main entry right here, your building
And you're going over to some of the wetlands, the area in front, just expand on parking.
here. Yes,
The existing parking.
So you could do
Yes.
that even with the retention.
you just have underground retention.
Underground.
Instead of open grass retention.
Because you're losing so much space there on the
Sure, yeah,
drop
definitely.
off area.
All right, no drop off on west, but on the east, yeah, they better provide us and because drop off is now restricted.
They did switch it, I thought it
They
still looked
cut,
like it was
with
there.
the sidewalk, they cut the,
you wanna go back to
It
East?
reduces
Yeah.
some of the lanes for east
Yeah.
on the children's side.
Yeah, basically,
and you've got ninth grade coming, so.
basically we would lose this strip of parking, but we do still have a lane that would, you could get around here, but you are losing some parking there, yes.
Could you still get around the back, like make it a big loop for drop off?
Yeah, so.
Yes.
You still have the
Still
access.
have the
road.
drop
Yeah.
off.
Yes,
Okay, as a parent, one lane drop off does not work,
There now.
especially when you're adding ninth grade, which is gonna add a whole bunch more traffic to that situation. So if anything, we're gonna need more access, but.
We can look at that as part of the overall.
There could be a.
Yeah, is there more access this way, you could expand it out?
Change
for
that
parking?
drop off.
And for us too, after we get through this, just so everybody knows, after we get through this and, get your thoughts and stuff like that, we haven't really sat down with any of the building leaders yet to say, okay, what do you think, what are ideas, what are we missing? So that would be the next step for us to get their feedback on actually operating this.
Yeah, that would be the best course of action for the building admins who are in there every day to tell you how they anticipate that work.
Right, but we want to get your feedback first, so if we need to make any modifications now before we go back to them, or if there's something that you said, no, not at all, or maybe consider this, we don't want to take it to them and say, look at this, but the board doesn't even want to consider it, so. Any questions about the high schools?
Where is Lakota Central in this plan?
Good, it is not, it's part of the overall numbers of high school students, but there's no specified place for central.
So is our thought that we would absorb that into the two buildings? Like west side, central kids would go to west side and east side
That
would
was,
go east side?
that was never an option that I thought we decided on. I thought, I don't know, that's a good question. My personal opinion is we need that, we need a spot for it.
When you say a spot, do you mean a spot in a building or a building?
However, I don't want them absorbed into the high schools. I don't want us to have two separate centrals, one at east and one at west. These kids are flourishing where they are. Some of them, it's their, for lack of a better way to say it, their last hope. And I don't want to, I mean, I know it's a lot of resources and I know, but that's just me, 1/5 of the governing body.
Because that's one thing I noticed when I was trying to find, in the original, I was like, well, I don't know where it is, right? So I didn't know if there'd been a conversation about an additional build, albeit a different size, you know what I mean? Or if it was, like you said, maybe there's a spot in one school that's
Right.
dead, I just didn't know if that, and I didn't know looking at these plans, do we even have a large enough spot that would be available to house that within something?
I'm not sure 5 years ago when we started this that we even had central, so I don't think we,
Right.
At one
And I
point,
think
there was-
I think that'll continue in our conversation. This is sort of a first look. What other things that we haven't considered yet? We're just looking at the big picture, high school, middle school, elementary. What other things are out there that we need to look at? But they're gonna be locally funded initiatives.
Right.
Perhaps, so we need a central, or we need another PD building for staff, or we haven't even talked about those things yet.
Right.
So those would be like round two of discussions to say, okay, once we get this understood, anything else above and beyond that might be locally funded, so what are we willing to put out there to locally fund, and what's our priorities around that, so.
okay.
Well, at one point, there was a conversation about possibly bringing Central here. Remember that when this was back when Lakota land was still on the table.
right,
Um,
got that. Okay.
and then doing something else with CO.
Yeah, those are all conversations that we can still have, for sure, that we'll need to have, really.
So our current theaters, auditoriums, hold how many?
Currently, there's 660 something.
So less than a
Less than
grade
a
level?
So we're,
I'm just trying to think of usability for a principal to bring people together in a space.
I don't think they
use the gym.
Yeah, I don't think they use them now for.
because of the office space, because they're at 7:30 right now, so.
Right.
But that could be, like, it may just be out of necessity that they don't versus the best functioning of the building.
Correct.
So, like we said, we don't wanna build our 1950 buildings with all this money for
I think we-
2050.
And correct me, but I think when I'm looking at this, the problem is that area is not touched, right?
It's sort of core of the building, to try to do in addition to that would be, it can be done, we can do anything, right, but it's gonna be fairly costly, and probably be a locally funded initiative, so.
So question, as you guys looked at this, I understand expanding outwards, was there any examination of going up to the third floor?
We did look at
Yes.
this one, yeah.
Actually, we did.
And why do we have this proposal?
I think we just felt that this floor plan worked the best flow-wise, and, of course, when you go through floors, you have to have another elevator to get up there, more stairwells, that type of thing, so.
But we want to look at it.
We could certainly go back and look at that, but absolutely.
We still probably need, but right now, this is a 2-floor addition, so if you just have one more story, I don't know if that gets you enough square footage. Because right now it's a 2-story addition, not a 1-story addition. For the OCC, we need that entire square footage, so. I don't know if we can enforce it.
Or how that cost compares if you
Right.
do expanding out versus up.
Are you talking about adding a third story onto the existing building? Or
Yes.
a three-story
Oh,
addition?
the existing building.
Yes,
Oh.
this is
I'm
moving
sorry.
out. I'm asking, did you guys look at going up?
That's generally not feasible.
Yeah.
With the existing building not being built for the whole third floor.
Okay, so it doesn't have the necessary infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Structurally, you typically have to just kind of completely restructure and build around it. And it also becomes very difficult to do in any kind of an operating building because if you're building over top, then it's not really safe to have it occupied. So you have to unoccupy it for 2 years. And the cost of the addition plus the cost of the restructuring underneath of it would make it significantly more expensive. We did look at building a smaller 3-story addition versus a 2-story addition.
Okay.
And that was less efficient for a number of reasons, which we could go into, but the difference between a 3-story addition and a 2-story addition is, I mean, sometimes it could be more efficient to do a 3-story addition, but in this case, we'd be looking at like smaller additions and then multiple elevators and so forth, so the 2-story addition seems to be what makes most sense.
Okay, everybody good there? So, just so everybody knows, this is 2 stories. So basically, what I showed you, that's the first floor, and then the second floor would basically be there. As you can see, it's not over where the dining addition would be. Over where the cafeteria addition, those would kind of be larger 2-story spaces. So there's not a second floor over those type areas, but overall the classroom areas, it would be a 2-story addition, which would tie into your existing building there.
So would there be the possibility though, like over those cafeterias to have that be the dedicated space for a central or central office employee, whatever the case may be? Is there a reason that you can't go over the cafeteria?
You can, typically you want your cafeteria, those big box areas to have taller ceilings and taller structure.
Okay.
So,
Fencing.
there again, yes, you could do it, but there'd probably be a stairwell or something or an elevator there again to get up to a higher elevation. But yes, you could do that.
And part of that was mechanical, which we probably also want to have large volume.
Okay, sites. Again, now we're on East Freshman, which I think should be next in the packet.
Yep.
Again, first 2 there again are existing the way it sits right now. And then we are looking at a site plan. We'll talk about site plan first. As you can see, all the stuff that's dashed here, that is stuff that is there currently and will basically be demoed out to allow for the new additions. So most of your parking and everything would be taken out. As you can see, very large new parking out in the front yard area there. And then some new bus drop off and that kind of thing in the back and the driver run. The site plan, that would be kind of how that site would be affected.
That one's a little bit different because it's tucked right in that corner, so you don't really have a whole lot of options to do, but to come out towards the front, there's nothing to really do with that for the bus lane and the small addition back there.
So this is the possibility of getting some additions put on this. And really the idea here is really what we're doing is, right now you basically have a wing here. This is basically then becomes a wing here. This is a new wing here, and you kind of have a 4th wing right here. So the concept is somewhat trying to break the school down into usable wing size for wings. The other thing you'll notice here, there again, with this school is very similar to high schools. The noisy type activity areas are on the side of this corridor. And there again, we've added another additional gym down here. We're showing taking the existing wrestling room and weight room and turning that into more cafeteria space. There again, because this cafeteria is basically landlocked where it is right now. So we think we can tear out, there's a storage room actually that's right here where it says corridor. So we can kind of connect these 2 spaces and they're both close to the existing serving area. That would cause need to move both the weight room and the wrestling room, so we're relocating those down in some new space here. Some new service area, which be mechanical type area or receiving type area. It also makes sense, we think, to your auditorium is back here, your music areas are back here, noisier type areas. This looks like a good location to add on to the music department. So we're showing an addition on the back here. They're again located next to the stage in your existing music type areas. And then the rest are basically classrooms. There again, we're showing some innovation and collaboration type areas that you might want to develop. We're showing outdoor learning areas or courtyards. There again, these might be fenced areas or something for security, but some of these areas could be developed for some outdoor learning possibilities.
Is there any renovations for locker rooms or bathrooms in any of these designs to make more single-sex options?
We have not got to that level of detail, but absolutely you could do that in your new additions, yes. Valid question.
Talking about the new additions, or you're talking about renovating the existing?
Oh.
Yeah, so none of these are showing any of the renovations in the existing, but yes, in the new addition.
New additions, you have to put those in.
We can go back and renovate old ones. if we need to.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Either way. Or whether-
Yeah, but we're just not representing any of the renovation, the future renovation for these.
So there again, this building, as the high schools were, this is a two-story arrangement. So there again, you can kind of see how the classroom areas fit over the top of the first floor down there.
Can I ask some of the thinking behind the outdoor area classrooms? I'm seeing a theme as we look through the things of additional outdoor classroom areas.
They're really there to create classrooms that have windows. I mean, our problem is if you take these two wings and you squish them together, well, you've eliminated all these classrooms with natural light. And windows are one thing that the OFCC is requiring in classrooms. That they
Okay,
have
so there is a
natural light.
requirement for class.
There is, yes. And we have found, I think you'll find through studies in that the reality is the outside light and everything is very important to classrooms. So we would recommend that we would certainly try to get natural light into every space.
Or by
Understood, there's
internal,
just operational costs of
Yes.
square footage with outdoor classrooms that historically haven't been utilized.
They
Absolutely.
use them a lot in the lower grades, like,
Yeah, and every principal I've talked to hates the maintenance, and it's usually parents who have come in on the weekends.
And that's why we talked about, and this would be all turfed area, we turf it right off the bat, when you build it, you turf it. So it's not a maintenance issue moving forward, it's green space, but you can put tables out there, stuff like that there's no grass mowing or.
Artificially green space.
Huh?
Artificially green space.
Yeah, or beds to maintain or things like that, because they have a lot of things sometimes to maintain.
It's a nightmare to get in there and clean them. You have to go through a building and
Right.
mulch, and it's just not,
Right.
You don't want them to work
It's
And I want to
all
steal your
it's just
question.
not ideal.
Okay, do we know what the or what the auditorium holds? How many seats?
I can't remember offhand.
that's the biggest.
It's not as big as high schools.
It's not as big as the high school?
No,
No, I don't think it is.
I think it's just under though,
it's probably like 550,
if I remember correctly.
around there.
It's been a while.
Okay, and we're looking at potentially 700 to 800 students in grade level. So same issue here.
Okay, any more questions on that one? We'll go on. Okay, we are now at Plains. This is again, the first couple are existing conditions that you have right now. And then we are showing proposed additions on this building. There again, what we're trying to do also is trying to make East Freshman and Plains very similar in function and layout, so that they would be equal type buildings. So again, you're gonna see with this one, we're kind of laying out 1, 2, 3, 4 corridors. very similar to what we had over at East Freshman. They're again, similar to the other one, you have the main spine that goes through this building, noisy and activities on this side, academic over on this side. They're again, similar to the other type building. We are showing a new auditorium on this one. There again, to create parity between the existing East Freshman and this building. New gymnasiums, locker rooms. This one is fairly easy to expand the cafeteria area because of course it's got an exterior wall that goes right out. So this one is fairly easy to add on to there. Fairly easy to add on to kitchen and serving type areas. Music area, there again, this is your existing music area next to your cafeteria and that. There again, expanding music areas that way. And then basically all this is classroom type area. I think another positive of some of these plans is we are thinking about isolation and using these facilities after hours. So we're kind of setting this up so that we could block off some of the academic areas. We could have some doors here, and maybe you could use some of these auditoriums and that kind of thing after hours and control your crowds and your people within the buildings also. So we're thinking about some of those things as the space is being laid out.
In these new builds, do we have enough rooms for all staff? I mean, there'd be no traveling teachers within the building, like no teachers on cards or stuff like that.
And part of that, we'd have to look at the programming, what do we want to program, what's
So,
current, what do we want? Right now, this is only based on square footage, based on number of students.
so not for
There's been nothing beyond that looked at, so we haven't talked about any programming or anything. That's the
So
next
that was
level
gonna
of
be my
discussion.
next question, because
Right,
the listening sessions are definitely providing some feedback about programming that could influence like spaces and size and just number of.
right. This is strictly a
Just
number,
size,
this is
gotcha.
strictly a
Okay.
number, based on what the OCC says we have for a student and the equivalent square footage we need to match
Okay.
up.
Well, and I would also think like the whole, with our special ed students too, areas and breakouts.
Yeah,
there.
that's a whole next level of discussion and stuff like that, what we're gonna do. This is just.
So
a-
just think pure square
Mathematical.
footage, mathematical, okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
In general, though, their square footage numbers allow for a school that will accommodate the full program and the full staff. So,
Okay.
I mean, where that it sometimes doesn't work is like if you have an abnormally large special ed population, then, you know, you might be eating into some of the other areas. But in general, if you're within the capacity, you're building to the size, there's enough room where you don't have to go around the cart and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically, the OFCC plans for 25 students per classroom. That's their formula, and they make sure that there's a classroom for every student in the building.
But is that- But if you have 25 scheduled in the homeroom and then you want a separate one that's gonna hold 25 for art, there's no space for that because it's just 25 per homeroom, or am I interpreting that incorrectly?
There's a utilization factor so that they're not figuring on full capacity in every classroom. So it works out to where, you have the flexibility to do, you know, like more art, less music and so forth, but it's designed with the factors such that you are able to have the full student population in without accommodating everything. So if you
Okay,
want.
let me ask it a different way. So if there were 25 kids, is it designed so that there are 100% of the time, 25 kids in each classroom?
Yes.
So it really wouldn't allow for if Sally Smith's homeroom is now in art, her classroom is empty as far as the calculation goes, and that's not really calculated in when they're doing the calculations. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are, I will say this to you though, again, these are super preliminary type drawings. A lot of it comes down to how efficient your plan is also. Within the square footage, sometimes you can get extra classrooms if you lay things out very efficiently.
Okay.
You know, because all the corridors and all the extra space, all that stuff counts towards the total square footage. The more efficient plan you can build and construct, you might be able to get extra classrooms constructed under the square footage and under the co-funded plan.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Isn't there a utilization factor at the high school level where they can figure switching classrooms and stuff, you're not able to fully occupy all classrooms at 100%? I think I think there's an allotment for that, so to recognize that when you're switching around classes, you're gonna have a certain amount of classes that you're just not gonna be able to get 25 in every.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's,
High schools are probably different than elementary.
that's correct, yes. Elementary school, it's full, yeah, it's 25 per classroom, because but high school is they recognize it. And I think I wanna say it's like 85% or something, so there is some wiggle room in there. I don't remember what grade levels it cuts off though, so the junior highs, the middle schools might, be somewhere in the middle.
So the purpose of this was just to really look at where they fit on the sites, how they fit on the sites. We have enough space. The next one will be to get feedback from you. What else you think we need to consider in this planning? Talking to the administrators, how would you operate this? If this was your building, how would you operate it? And get some feedback from that. Then start really fine tuning. Okay, what about our social items? What about our art? What about our music? Do we really want to look at that differently? Are there things that are very important to us as a community and we want to support regardless of the OCC supports it or not, that we want this in our building? So those are the type of discussions that we'll start to have as we venture down this path.
And thinking about the auditoriums that have come up a couple of times, and I know that last one, it looks like it's a new build auditorium, is in the new build, obviously, it being an option, or in existing, is adding a balcony to increase capacity, something that infrastructure, like to build up on an auditorium that's pre-existing, possible. And or maybe cost prohibitive, I don't know, but.
Whether it's possible depends on, to a certain extent, on the geometry. Do you have enough room to do it? Is it economically feasible? Almost never.
Okay.
Just to get in there to restructure and then to get access to it and so forth is, I mean, unless it was planned from the beginning to be able to add it later, even then it's gonna be very expensive square footage.
But so potentially, like the Plains one, that would be a new build auditorium, if the footprint could be bigger, if we requested larger, it could potentially be balcony, more seating show.
Auditoriums are over 5.
For the most part, you can sometimes co-fund the stage.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
well, yeah, they'll
Yeah, if you have a
co-fund.
theater class, I mean, you do part of the fund, like the stage or something like
Got
that.
it.
But the auditorium itself would be locally funded, so you can build it however you want.
Okay.
Get out your checkbook, please.
Unfortunately, all your auditoriums and your buildings are kind of landlocked. They're kind of in the center of the buildings, which makes them very difficult, almost impossible.
Unless you really do something crazy and just flip those out and repurpose classrooms and build a new auditorium on one of the new additions.
Yeah.
But that's probably going to be a lot of locally funded stuff. But things like that we could talk about and say, if that's really important to us, we want to, an auditorium that would fit the entire student body. What does that look like? What does it cost? But those are the kind of discussions we need to have to start to fine tune this. Any additional questions about the general layout? If you have anything, you can email me, we'll get it, look at it, and put it in writing, we need to bring it back for a future meeting, other considerations. Just let me know, we can start to put that in our parking lot of things that we need to consider as we start to go through this process after we do. I think the next one is we'll look at the, go back towards the beginning of our minor C, look at the schedule real quick. At the last meeting too, we'll cover a couple things here. At the last meeting, we talked a lot about architect. When we bring on the architect, we talked about construction managers at risk and what that would look like and owner's rep. So I have some additional information for that. So we'll start with construction manager at risk. I had conversations with a couple of groups that do that kind of work. And for the most part, they recommended not coming on board until you start the design phase of it. Right now, they said if you have someone going through your master planning process, like Jim and his team, that they would work with them sort of pro bono to give them information and stuff for costing and stuff. But until you start actually the design piece of it, they would like to be on board when you start the actual design work, and that they can be more of a benefit for that. And if you just want to do that, the pre-construction services, based on the size of, they call it pre-construction fees, so all the preliminary work to help with design and do that kind of stuff. Before you get into the actual bond piece to pass it and do it, they said that work is probably right around $1 million. $1 million, based on the size of the entire, the whole,
Is that
all three phases, that's all three phases. So if you want to come on and just look at phase one, it's probably a third of that, maybe.
And that's just the pre-work?
Yeah, that's the pre,
The pre-work, wait, I mean, is the pre-work the million, or the pre-work is a third of that, so it's $333,000?
the pre-construction for all three phases is about $1 million. It's based off the total budget for all three phases, right?
Okay.
So if you only want to focus on the first phase right now, and we'll get to the other phases after we've had, because if you want to get a jump start, the whole idea is to get a jump start and try to get this done sooner. And Jim will talk through that plan. If you want to bring them on to pre-construction services, phase one to get that jump started, probably looking at about $300,000 of fees that will be pre-bond that you probably invest in. That makes sense. That makes sense? So if you're going to bring them on sooner without passing a bond, it's right around $300,000 based on the size of the scope of the project. Architect fees too. Got some feedback about architect fees. Again, it's broken down into different portions of it. The overall fee, you'll negotiate it once you do it, but in general, it's around 6% of the plan. But you can break it down and get into, you have your program verification, your schematic design phase, design development, then you do your construction documents. So anything before you start getting into construction documents would be something that you may want to look at doing sooner to start that process moving forward. And if you look at that, you're probably a little over $2 million roughly for the first phase to do that. Right around 2 million, right? 1 point. Yeah, right around 2. Right around 2. And Jim will talk through the schedule, what that really means. Okay, if we want to start earlier or we wait till the bond, and how that looks from a process standpoint. So we'll talk through the schedule, how that works.
Sure. So we've laid out three different scenarios here for you to consider. So the first one here is, we're saying that basically all the architectural work and the construction manager work would happen after you pass your bond issue, okay? So as you can see, we're showing here committee meetings, that you can see our line here for election day. You can basically continue your meetings kind of like what you're doing right now. They would be, though, I think, more operational type. You probably address busing, a lot of those things that you can do as a school district and not as much for an architect or a construction manager to do. So those would be more geared towards internal things. And then basically you would hire right after your passage, you would hire the architect and the construction manager or an owner's rep, whichever direction you would go. It would take us about 16 months then to go through all the planning processes, all the submittals to the OFCC, to do the construction documents, to prepare everything. Be 3 months then to basically bid those jobs. The construction manager would take those and bid them, and we'd be getting building permits at the same time. And then you've got about 16 months to actually construct. So this schedule takes you out basically January of 2030 would be about when you would finish up the project.
Is that phase one or all three phases?
That would be phase one.
Phase one, okay, yeah.
Really, this schedule is good around phase one.
Yeah.
second scenario here is if you go ahead and hire an architect and a construction manager basically now, and you pay them to go ahead and do your schematic design and your design development, which basically what those are, it's kind of laying out, coming up with a plan that everybody likes, making sure it all fits on the site. Engineers are involved, they're looking at mechanical systems, they're looking at how things can be tied in. And then the design development, it even gets down to looking at what casework and everything goes in the art rooms. It goes down to that level of meeting with individual people within the school that work there, getting their finite needs all identified. So by the time you get here then, you're pretty much, all the decisions are made. Finishes, you probably decided on the flooring types, kind of all those things. You get to here, and then the architect would actually do the construction drawings or the construction documents. And this is the big chunk of the money, is if you know, for architects, this is where all the money is spent in this amount right here. So the good thing about that is all the decisions are made, election, you pass, architect gets going, he can then only take 8 months because basically all the decisions are made. Take 8 months, same thing then, you bid, get permits, 16 months to build. This will get you in about January, March of 28. So the reality is you'd probably be open for a school year of 28, 29 in reality. And then the third scenario, there again, you hire the architect and the construction manager and you say, we want to go as fast as we can go, guys. So you hire us and we just work straight through, all the way through the preliminary stuff, continue on right through the election, get the construction documents done, bid, build. You could probably get in then by January of 28. You could probably get in over Christmas break if you wanted to do a mid-year move-in. So those are kind of the three scenarios as we see.
With phase 1 versus phase 3, or the first option versus the third. When I look at the first option, we're essentially starting a year later, but the completion is over 2 years later. So logically, I'm struggling because it's like your 16 months, 3 months, 16 months are the same on both. It's just when those begin is a year later. Why does it push it out over 2 years and 2 months? When you're just starting 1 year later.
Should that be because of the hiring of the manager and the construction one sooner on the third one?
Yeah, you are doing that sooner, but I don't understand why if you push that back 1 year, it pushes the outcome back 2 years, 2 months.
Well, basically, when do you want to spend the money? And you want to spend the money before you pass the bond or not? So, like Jim said, the bulk of the money is going to be in the construction documents when you're designing that, and that's costly.
Right.
So basically, you're waiting till after you pass the bond to spend that big chunk of money.
Right.
So if you're gonna wait till after the bond, you're gonna get everything done, and you'll start that right after you pass the bond and start that work. If you're wanting to pay for it now, they'll go right through that and keep working. So we'll get all the schematic design stuff, and they'll start the construction designs even before the levy starts.
I get that, but it shouldn't be starting something.
I see what, I think.
Starting something a year later shouldn't take it 2 years.
2 years,
Right,
yeah,
right,
that should
right.
be
You're absolutely
29.
right.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
my mistake right here.
Okay.
This is 28.
29, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is 1 year later.
That's
Yeah.
29.
That's 29.
This should be 29.
Yeah, this should be 29.
Okay.
This is where I meant, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is.
You lost a year.
I lost a year.
Yeah.
Leap year.
That's my bad. Yeah, good pickup. Thank you.
I just feel like logically that made no sense.
I was thinking maybe because of the delay in the hiring,
Yeah,
that's why it cost a
That's
little.
right, but if it
Needed more
delays,
time, yeah.
if it delays a year, it's delayed. This is
Yeah.
really a multiplier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're
Yes.
just over a year difference,
Yeah.
not 2 years.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we'll get that corrected and put it in the folder.
Jim, I know that in our prior work together, people really struggle sometimes when you don't have a concept in front of you. You know what I mean? Like they're like, What does it look like? What is my money being spent on? Like, tell me where my dollars and cents are going, right? And I remember you saying, even in rooms I've been in, I'm like, this is not what we're building. It's just a concept. Like, don't think of this as your classroom and my, like, you gotta get up out of that, right? You gotta think bigger than that. Knowing, I just wonder, with our kind of levy history, what, in your experience, does it help people to kind of have that clarity going into a bond of where is my money being spent versus a more abstract, nebulous concept that maybe some people struggle to put their head around?
Or is it more objections?
Or is it more objections?
I don't like the corner
Right,
room.
right.
I don't like the yellow tile.
What is your experience? And again, I'm kind of just trying to layer our levy history on top of that, which is, like you said, it's kind of both ways, but do you have any feeling of that?
I think we've seen it go both ways. That's just as you're saying. Sometimes too much detail and everybody pokes. It's like, where's the bathroom? You don't have enough urinals, or And then other times, if you don't have enough, people are like, well, what am I voting on? I don't, what am I doing here? So personally, I like to get to some level that people
Some clarity,
can
but
see
not total
some
clarity.
something maybe in this range. At least people understand where things will be going and have some concept and maybe some kind of 3D view of kind of what the outside would look like. And, I don't think it has to be super highly defined, but I think people do want to see, it's a ton of money. What am I buying? How's this really going to work? So,
I think also with additions to existing buildings, we would envision the additions, fitting in with the existing buildings, not being radically different. It's a little more dangerous if you have a brand new building that's not been designed yet, and you throw something out there and people love it or hate it. So, but with these, you could represent in a 3D format what the exterior would look like, and it's less likely to be, a big objection because it's a known, if people don't like the existing look of the building, well, I mean, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's, I look at it like when, when they're trying to get people to vote for a new Bengals stadium or something, there's always a rendering. They've always done preliminary work. And so I think it's helpful to build energy around something where you can show something.
Yeah, I think in phase 3, you'll get a lot more of that as you're building new buildings, where are they gonna be, what are they gonna look like?
Right.
Here, it's like, we know what it's like, this could be a little bit bigger than what it is right now. Maybe a little bit different for each freshman in Plains, because there'll be a little bit different. The high schools we've already put on the high schools once already. You can barely tell where the additions are.
I also think we need a combination of some sort of something and the education of why. We know that you heard in your listening sessions that we've been hearing forever, the size of our classrooms are unacceptable. So I think, to me, it's a little bit of both. It's some sort of schematic that's not too detailed but not too vague, and I think education of why behind it.
Well, I think to Chris's point about programming, like when you go out to engage that program, I mean, yes, space is great, don't get me wrong, class size is certainly kind of space, but also like, not only am I getting space, but here's the additional programming or impact of programming, but that's the narrative that's got to build, right?
Right. I agree.
And just one last thing about, it also touched on the owner's rep piece. There are firms out there that will do the owner's rep as well. I've talked to those firms and I've talked to others as well. I think we'd be better off, if we want to shoot owner's rep, if someone's going to sit in the trailer during construction and help manage that. From what I've talked to, you're better off hiring someone on your staff for a short 3-year contract or whatever it's going to be to do that. You can pay them $90,000 a year, or you're going to pay an owner's rep firm about $1 million to do that work, to be percentage, so.
And I'm more accustomed to the first. You
Yeah,
hire somebody for like a contract and
Yeah.
they fulfill that duty.
yeah, it has a construction background, we hire them for a short period of time, and they can report to myself or whoever we want to report to. And there will be a person on site every day to make sure it gets done according to the plan, and that's a lot less of a investment, we still get the results that we're looking for. Any other questions about this? I know we talked a little bit about transportation, we talked about how that would look. Just as a preliminary, that's one of the operational things along with programming, that we said we'd have to look at. So I put together a spreadsheet just on estimated costs of what it would be. Depending on how soon we go, estimated FY '28, that we look at. Either we don't have it or we do have it. And I use scenario 2 when I first got here. The most routes we ever had when we did everybody at K-12 was 221 routes. Right now we're at 190. So again, that might be a little more because we went to 221, we still had the same old freshman building, so we had an extra layer of routing that was going on. So 221 may not be high, may not be that high, but that's probably a conservative look at where it would be. And estimated costs, is everything, like, give you some perspective for FY '25, for everything that's involved with transportation, to including yellow buses, monitors, homeless, payment in lieu of, all the stuff we do regarding transportation. This year I asked Adam for $23 million, a little over $23 million for all that.
Per year.
Per year. That's what I asked for this week.
That's this year.
If we did, okay, that's not the addition, that's just the.
No,
okay,
That's
what-
FY '25.
I'm trying to use, yeah, that's the current,
Okay,
that's what,
we
That's
did
his
today.
starting point.
yeah, that's my starting, that's what I asked for this fiscal year, FY '25, for everything transportation, fuel, the whole bundle. For FY '28, if we did no high school at all, I would estimate we would spend, about the same amount, little over 23 million. I base it on, we would have, what we had before, we were at minimum, we would have 160 routes. So 30 fewer routes than what we have right now.
So 30 fewer routes in 4 years would cost us the same as it costs us now.
Assuming 4% yearly increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So a better way to look at it is what are we assuming now and what our costs would be if we do nothing
Right.
versus.
That's where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes it's easier to look at it as today to today,
right.
Yeah, I think we need to
because
compare
it's
apples
going to be
apples.
relative out.
So how do you want it to look?
So either if the benchmark that we're using is the 23 million for fiscal year 25, then I think we use $25, right? So, because you're not asking for 23 and 28, are you?
No.
Okay, so I think either what is your projected fiscal year 28 versus this new number, or we take this estimate of the 160 routes and today's dollars.
I can do that.
That way you have an idea.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's how-
you said 221 is conservative if we go back to what we had when we were full busing, but haven't we added several private school routes in addition to what we had? So how does that?
We've done that, but we used to transport to more private schools. Right now, both Moeller and St. Anne's are ineligible, so we don't transport to them at all. So we had a couple buses for each of those that passed. But again, those routes are measured from freshman buildings, so not the main campuses. So we may have to do a retiming on those, to see if they're eligible. Right now, they're not. But all the other ones we have right now,
If you take up where we're at right now, say you're looking at somewhere in the 26 versus 23 and a half.
Right.
Couple $1 million.
26 million and 28
Just
to
rough,
everybody.
just-
So that to do no high school.
That's where we're at today. If you just scale up where we're at today.
So-
But no high
What do you mean by
school,
scale up? I'm not sure.
So today's
Years,
budget,
if you take it up to
for
fiscal
28, it
28,
would be 26.
26 is somewhere in that
26
neighborhood
million for no high school busing.
for what we have today.
No,
Right,
if we
for
do
a
nothing.
freshman bus.
we
Exactly
spend
how we
our
have it
freshman.
today, 3 years down the road.
So about $3 million on operations.
It would be be helpful for me to see these in writing versus
Yeah,
just.
it'll be in the minutes, that's why it's twisted into Kelly on
Okay,
too.
but if we could have,
Yeah.
I do better with the numbers when I
Yeah.
see them in front of me. So.
Yeah, why can't I?
Thought that was a slide.
Huh? No, I'm looking for. You should. Why is
No
it-
high school busing, 17.
Yeah. No.
That just be for next
Stuck
time,
on
that's
that.
fine. Let's-
Stuck on
we
this one,
can-
won't show my screen.
We can move forward. You could maybe provide us that, if you
Yeah.
said it'll be in the minutes.
Yeah, it's in the minutes already, so,
And
or in the agenda.
did you do a scenario
Yeah,
with
doing the
high school busing?
the links
Yeah, with
in
high
the
school for
agenda.
all, that's basically the 220 routes.
In that Google agenda.
Do you want me to go copy it? I can go copy
No,
it.
yeah, that's okay, just.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, with everything that's around, for FY 28, adding those routes is what, 30 million? Compared to 23,
Oh, to go full on.
So essentially, if we stay exactly as we are, with freshman busing in fiscal year 28, it would be 26 million.
Right,
But if we added in the rest of the high school, the 10 through 12,
right.
it would be 28 million, is that what
Close
it
to
is?
30,
30, okay.
And that would
that's-
be 9 through 12.
then 9 through 12, yeah.
And that's also not counting the one-time infrastructure like we had to do when we put pressure in. It was around $1 million in parking. And-
1.2.
Yeah, that would add that on as well, and that's more
Parking,
capital than
Oh, the
operation.
service center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you had the buildings.
And
And
the
if, yeah,
sorry.
I wasn't following that either.
We had to store
Well,
all that
that's-
money.
And back then, we didn't have any of the van routes that we have now and stuff like that, so.
Are we interested in having a 9 through 12 campus that only transports freshmen?
Well, that's my concern.
Because, I mean, and I think Kelly, actually, I think it was you, Kelly, that said it, like, I'm a sophomore and I'm a freshman. I can put my freshman on the bus, but I gotta take my high schooler, I gotta figure out how to get my high schooler there, like, my brain tends to go to, right, wrong, good or bad, all or nothing, right? Either you
That's
bus them
right.
all, or you don't bus any. Because I feel like it's kind of that logistics, it's almost like the cell phone piece, like if the sophomore gets on the bus, I mean, not that a bus driver would necessarily know that, but if the sophomore gets on the bus or we learn about it, well, what does that look like?
Well, and I would imagine that's gonna eat up a lot of that operational savings, so you're looking at,
Right?
you know, just provide, yeah, I think.
I think it has to be an all or nothing. I don't know how we control that. And I also don't know how Moeller and St. X are on the picture. Does that mean Mount Notre Dame's on the picture?
So
And
within the law says they gotta be within a 30-minute drive time, so this really would
so
take.
none of our Catholic high schools are within the 30
All
minutes.
federal kids, Baden is, Mount Notre Dame is, Ursuline is.
So that's another layer of
Right.
if we bus
But-
everybody.
You have to
back
take that
when we had
cost
200
in.
When we had
Then we bus all
221, that included all that, because we did that back in the day.
Right, I remember.
And it also included St. X and more back then.
Yeah, Chris brought that up, that if we bus all, then all of those private school kids that we haven't been busing, because we don't do it in 10 through 12, we're gonna
Right,
absorb that.
that's,
back in.
again, I think if we don't think about that, we have to think about that. 'cause it's-
Is that in the 30 million or no?
Yeah, when we did, the max we had, when we had 18,000 kids here, and we transported to every private school,
Okay.
it was 221 routes.
What year was that?
It was 10, FY 10,
Yeah.
right before the levy.
Yeah.
I imagine there's probably some increase just given with the vouchers and.
So it's a lot.
Yeah, but if they weren't going to private schools, if they were in our school, we'd still be transporting them. 18,000 kids, it's 18,000 kids whether they're here or.
Yeah.
But it's just more operational expensive to transport
We should take a
more
look,
non-Lakota kids to non-Lakota schools.
we should take a look at, if the movement from West Freshman to West puts either of those back in the service center.
100%, yeah.
And I still say, let's make a full court press on lobbying for some changes in the laws and what it allows, so that we don't have empty buses. We're able to do it potentially efficiently by charging a nominal fee for those who are gonna use it. And I mean, again, maybe I am still too Pollyanna, but I believe that if the legislature thought about the fact that it's either they're getting nothing or they're getting a service by charging a nominal fee, why wouldn't they support
Because they
allowing
don't
some
care.
service?
We should be able to find some advocates across the state.
I would hope.
It may not be what we're thinking of, but there's gotta be enough that would advocate.
Tied to busing but different. I guess it's two questions. Have we surveyed, because you know, when you see, say busing, just in general, you get opinions, right? Have we surveyed about busing, and have we surveyed about where we are, just to get a feel of the levy in general?
So that was, I had suggested that perhaps we have Paul Allen do a
And-
survey, and he could float a levy or bond issue question. I wrote down about busing. I also wrote down, if you were considering, and Paul would know whether or not this would work. If you're considering supporting a bond issue, would you prefer a concept or an actual design? Would you want to see, just to see, that's a temperature.
And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes you think you have a decision to make, but in reality, if you want to vote, the public will tell you what it has to be, right? I lived that last spring, we had passed, and the public said, nope, 78% want this, right? And so it completely changed gears, so I wonder if that might be, help us make decisions to know what is more successful for a November bond. Because if somebody said like, without voting yet, I mean, and you don't know until you
Right.
vote ballot, but I mean, it might just give us a little bit, he's really good at questioning those.
And-
With the strategic plan work coming up, it's an ideal time to do another survey.
How much does he cost again?
Around 24-ish, I think.
24,000?
And I think we have to, and he's an expert at this,
That might be too much.
and I know he's an expert, we've used him before. I feel like we have to be careful how we ask that busing
Yeah, I
question.
agree.
You out there and say, will you use busing? Everybody says yes. We saw it in 2010, 11. Every high school parent said, I will use busing, and we pulled busing out of high schools virtually empty. Because every parent says yes, in case they need them. So I feel like we have to be, I want to get a genuine feel for if somebody really, and to Julie's point, even though we haven't, maybe there is some way to put in a legislative, like, would you be willing to pay a nominal fee? Or not, because we know that we can't do that legally yet. Yet.
Well,
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
We just gotta make sure too, when we did the whole design piece, we're accommodating for buses and.
Well, that's the thing, like, we need to know that before, I don't wanna have to
Go back.
lose space in something else because we put a busing in and we're not gonna have it, or the reverse.
I also think that timeline, helping people, and again, that's engaging community is important because a high school parent in that survey is not gonna matter, right? They're not gonna be a high school parent. They're gonna be, you're really having to think, okay, where does that mean in 28, 29?
The reality is, if we take the longer timeline, then sixth graders would be the first ones to use the.
Right,
the
so I
new
think
high
helping
schools.
people understand
If
it's
the
not the
shorter one, it's
current
eighth
lens,
graders.
it's your
Right.
forward thinking, right?
It's just me and Chris.
That's right.
We're the only ones it'll apply to.
But it also, it comes into from a levy standpoint, so if you are looking at that timeline of 2030, then you're not gonna get any engagement from junior high or high school parents. If you are talking a shorter time frame, you do get people from.
No, I think that's one of the keys too, we have to look at as a group, what we want that timeline to be, because.
And also the whole finances and the
Right, how you
building
spend
and
the money.
everything else and how that all went out.
Right.
And
we've talked
when you
about
look at
that.
those people, none of phase one addresses overcrowding in elementary schools.
Yeah.
And that's their number one issue.
So, and I mean,
And that's, when we broke down phase one, that's just how we just did it.
Yeah, I understand.
But we say phase one is high school and middle school together, or maybe that's your phase one, so if you do those together or get them done, you get your sixth graders out of your elementary buildings,
That will
that
help.
frees up space.
And when it looked like, on the timeline, when it looked like a bond going clear across all phases, well, that would mean if you went for the whole thing, then that phase timeline could change a lot.
Yeah.
Versus we go after this one, then we go after that one, then we go after that one.
Right, so that's just how we broke down the phases, but if there's a different thought process about how we want to phase this out.
That's a good question for me. I'm assuming we can change the timing of the phases and components and stuff like that. That wouldn't.
Yeah, we just have to talk to the logistics, what's that mean?
Yeah, because
Right, yeah, that's.
and they will care.
But that's something Dr. Wiley and I spoke about a lot, is there's gotta be a balance between operational savings and enhancement program. And so if an enhancement program is district-wide busing, well, then that's an enhancement.
As long as people use it.
Right.
Right.
So it doesn't become
Because
wasted
that's
money.
my fear, we talk about being enhancement program, we get the money to levy passes, nobody uses busing, and then we don't do it anymore. And then we're really like, looking like we're just.
You take that with you. If you have to go, I just write down what time you left.
Just before we go, before we wrap up, is there anything that you want me to bring back for the next meeting and specifically to look at or consider, that we can get head start on now? Or you want to send me an email to do that either way? so we can
I have
get it
some of these topics further on the board retreat,
out? Okay,
which is before our next meeting.
Is it
So
before?
hopefully I can
Okay.
get some, it's next Thursday.
all
So
right.
hopefully I'll get some, little bit more granularity on. what,
Yeah,
you know,
that way we can
Yeah.
Yeah,
put that into any work you need to do.
no discussion there.
That'd be perfect.
Good idea.
Again, if anything comes up between now and then, you need additional information or something, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, very much.
Thank you.
This is very helpful.
All right, anything else?
If I could talk to board members, that'd be great.
Motion to adjourn. And second.
Second.
Thanks, Julie. Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. D,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield,
Yes.
Ms. Manning, Mr. Sarge,
Yes.
Mr. Vogman,
Yes.
Dr. Wiley,
Yeah.
Mr. Zink, yes. Meeting adjourned at 3:30.
Requisition